Connor Hayes had never planned to cause a diplomatic stir on his first assignment. Fresh out of the Earth-Interstellar Alliance's Cultural Liaison program, he was thrilled and more than a little nervous about his posting on Veltrian 4. The planet was a jewel of the galaxy with its emerald skies, phosphorescent seas, and cities suspended in translucent spheres above the forested surface. But more importantly, it was home to one of the most ancient and sophisticated societies humanity had encountered in its fledgling interstellar adventures. Connor had spent weeks studying Veltrian customs. The Veltrian people, known for their graceful movements and intricate social rituals, valued respect and attentiveness. Even minor gestures carried deep cultural weight, and Connor was determined to make a good impression. Still, no amount of research could fully prepare someone for immersion in a truly alien world. He wandered through the sprawling market district with his colleague and friend, James Fulton. James had been stationed on Veltrian 4 for over a year and acted as Connor's informal guide. The marketplace was a sensory overload, towering displays of shimmering cloth, stalls laden with fruits that glowed faintly in the dim light, and melodic voices hawking wares in a flowing, musical language. Connor tried to keep up as James navigated the labyrinthine streets. "You see that stand over there?" James pointed toward a vendor with a cascade of crystalline figurines. "Those aren't just decorations, they're used in family ceremonies. The shapes and colors symbolize different clans." "Got it," Connor said, making a mental note. "No touching unless invited." "Exactly. And over here," James gestured to a row of glowing orbs hanging from a canopy. "Those aren't just light fixtures. They're memory vessels. The Veltrians can imprint significant moments onto them. Sort of like a diary, but, luminous." Connor nodded. He was starting to get the hang of this. "Anything else I should know?" James smirked. "Plenty, but you'll learn as you go. Just don't go picking up random." "Excuse me." A smooth, resonant voice interrupted them. The two men turned to see a Veltrian woman approaching. She was tall and willowy, her emerald-green skin glowing faintly in the soft, ambient light. She wore a long, flowing robe that shimmered with every movement. Her golden eyes fixed on Connor with a look that was both curious and intense. "You're new here," she said, her voice lilting. It wasn't a question. Connor hesitated. "Yes. I just arrived a few days ago." The woman tilted her head, a slow, deliberate movement that seemed to carry meaning Connor didn't fully grasp. "Welcome. I am Ellis. I'm Connor Hayes, and this is James Fulton." He extended a hand before remembering that Veltrians didn't shake hands. Ellis, however, didn't seem offended. "Connor," Ellis repeated, her gaze lingering on him. "You should be careful with what you wear." Connor blinked. "What I wear?" Her eyes dropped to his shirt, a simple tunic he'd purchased at one of the market stalls. It was silver and crimson, a color combination that caught his eye as elegant and unique. But now he noticed that a few passing Veltrians were staring at him, some whispering quietly. "That garment," Ellis said, her tone measured, "is reserved for very specific ceremonies. It signifies a bond. A commitment." Connor's stomach sank. I didn't know. The vendor just said it was traditional." Ellis's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "It is. But traditions often carry more meaning than outsiders realize." James shot him a look, part sympathy, part amusement. "Looks like you might have made your first cultural blunder." "Great," Connor muttered. "I'll go change immediately." Before he could leave, Ellis stepped closer. "There's no need to panic. It is not irreversible." She studied him for a long moment, then added, "You were sincere in your apology. That is what matters most." Connor nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Thank you. I didn't mean to offend anyone." "You are forgiven," Ellis said simply. "But you may wish to choose your attire more carefully in the future." As the Veltrian woman walked away, Connor let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "That was close," he said to James. "Could have been worse," James replied. "At least she didn't summon a council meeting or anything. Come on, let's grab a drink. You'll need it after that." The two men continued through the market, stopping at a small cafe-like stand that served a rich, spiced brew. They sat at a sleek, curved table that seemed to grow organically from the ground beneath them. "I'll admit," Connor said, taking a sip, "this whole cultural exchange thing is more complicated than I expected." "It always is at first," James said. "You're learning, though. And hey, you handled that pretty well back there." "Thanks, I think." Connor glanced toward the direction Ellis had gone. She seemed understanding, at least. "Yeah, Ellis is unique. You'll see more of her, I'm sure. She's got a way of appearing when you least expect it." Connor raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean by that?" James shrugged. "Let's just say she has a reputation for being observant. If she took the time to speak with you, it means she's paying attention. That's not a bad thing, just something to keep in mind." "Noted." Connor leaned back, letting the warm, spiced drink settle his nerves. I'll try not to make any more clothing-related faux pas in the future. James chuckled. Don't worry. By the time you've been here a month, you'll be telling the new recruits what to wear and what not to wear. It's all part of the learning curve. As the two men talked, the Veltrian market around them hummed with life. Connor felt a bit more at ease, though he couldn't shake the memory of Ellis's piercing gaze. Something about the way she looked at him, intense, almost knowing, stayed with him. Hey, James, Connor said after a moment, how much do you know about Veltrian traditions? Beyond the basics? A fair amount, James replied. Why? Just curious. If I'm going to be stationed here long-term, I should probably learn more about the deeper cultural stuff. Like what certain clothes mean, for example. James nodded thoughtfully. That's a good idea. We can talk more about it when we're off duty. For now, just focus on observing. Watch how they interact, listen to the way they speak to each other, and don't be afraid to ask questions, just make sure you phrase them respectfully. Got it. Connor drained the last of his drink and stood. All right, let's head back. I've had enough excitement for one day. As they walked through the market, Connor noticed Ellis again, speaking with another Veltrian. She glanced in his direction, her golden eyes meeting his briefly before returning to her conversation. James nudged him. Told you she's always watching. Connor chuckled, though his thoughts were more serious. He couldn't help wondering what role Ellis might play in his time on Veltrian 4. Perhaps their paths would cross again in ways he couldn't yet predict. For now, he focused on taking things one step at a time, determined to learn from his mistakes and to approach the alien culture with respect and open-mindedness. Connor Hayes and James Fulton sat on the edge of a Veltrian terrace, the sprawling cityscape shimmering beneath them. High above, the faint outline of Veltrian's sister moons could be seen through the translucent dome that shielded the settlement from the planet's erratic weather. Connor held a small notebook in his hands, flipping through hastily scribbled notes on Veltrian customs as James leaned back against the smooth, glass-like surface of the railing. All right, James said, nudging Connor's arm. Tell me again why you bought that tunic in the first place. Connor sighed. I told you it was supposed to help me blend in. I thought wearing something traditional would show respect. James smirked, shaking his head. Man, you couldn't have picked something more neutral? I mean, you didn't even ask what it meant before slapping it on. I didn't think it was going to be such a big deal, Connor admitted. Besides, how was I supposed to know the vendor wouldn't warn me? He just smiled and handed it over. Well, welcome to the Veltrian School of Hard Lessons, James said, chuckling. Rule 1, always ask questions. Rule 2, if you don't understand, don't touch. And Rule 3, when in doubt, look for me. Connor gave a half-hearted laugh. Thanks. I'll keep that in mind. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind them. Turning, Connor saw Ellis approaching. Her steps were as smooth and deliberate as before, and she carried a small, glowing device that resembled a cross between a tablet and a pane of crystal. Connor, Ellis said in that calm, resonant voice of hers. I see you're taking your studies seriously. He straightened slightly. Trying to. I figure if I'm going to be here for a while, I'd better get it right. James grinned and added, we were just talking about the tunic incident again. He's still pretty embarrassed. Ellis inclined her head. Embarrassment is a sign of self-awareness. It shows that you care about making a good impression. Yeah, but I'd rather not keep messing up, Connor replied, running a hand through his hair. I don't want to offend anyone. Ellis stepped closer, holding out the glowing device. If you wish to learn more, I can help. This contains a record of our most important traditions. I curated a selection that may be particularly useful to you. Connor hesitated, then reached for the device. You do that for me? Of course, Ellis said simply. If you are willing to learn, I am willing to teach. Thanks, Ellis. I appreciate it. Connor turned the device over in his hands, its surface cool and smooth. The symbols on the screen shifted and danced, forming intricate patterns that seemed to tell a story he couldn't yet understand. Let me show you how it works, Ellis said, stepping beside him. She pointed to a series of symbols. This section covers ceremonial garments. It explains the meaning of each design and color combination. For example, the silver and crimson you wore are reserved for declaring one's intent to court a mate. It is not simply a decoration. Connor nodded slowly. Right? Got it. What about other things? Gestures, for instance. Ellis tapped another section. Here you will find common gestures and their interpretations. Each movement, no matter how small, carries meaning. For example, tilting the head to the right while speaking can signal sincerity. But tilting it too far can be seen as mocking. It's subtle but important. James, still leaning against the railing, whistled low. Sounds like you've got a lot to learn, Connor. I know, Connor said, his tone both resigned and determined. But I'm not going to screw up again. Not if I can help it. Ellis gave him a faint smile. You will make mistakes, as we all do. What matters is how you respond to them. The three of them spent the next hour going over various customs and practices, with Ellis patiently explaining each one. Connor found himself increasingly fascinated by the complexity of Veltrian culture. The intricacy of their social rituals, the depth of their symbolic language, it was unlike anything he'd encountered before. Can I ask you something? Connor said, glancing at Ellis. Of course. Why are you helping me? Ellis tilted her head slightly, a gesture Connor now recognized as thoughtful consideration. Because I believe in understanding. When different peoples come together, misunderstandings are inevitable. But if we can find common ground, if we can learn from one another, then both sides can grow. I wish to see that growth. That's pretty noble, Connor admitted. I'm lucky you're willing to take the time. James clapped him on the back. Told you she's good people. Now you just have to not mess it up. Ellis turned her attention to James. And you, James, have you been teaching him well? James raised his hands in mock defense. Hey, I'm doing my part. I can't help it if he's a slow learner. Connor rolled his eyes. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Ellis gave a soft chuckle, a sound that seemed to resonate more deeply than her words. It seems you have a good friend here. That will help you on your journey. I hope so, Connor said, casting a sidelong glance at James. As long as he doesn't let me fall flat on my face again. No promises, James replied with a grin. Their laughter echoed off the smooth walls of the terrace, mingling with the soft hum of Veltrian's distant marketplaces. For the first time since his arrival, Connor felt a flicker of optimism. He still had a long way to go, but with Ellis's guidance and James's support, he thought maybe, just maybe, he could find his place here. Connor and James stood at the edge of a sprawling Veltrian field, the ground beneath them covered in a soft, moss-like growth that glowed faintly in the waning light of the day. In the distance, a towering crystalline structure shimmered, casting long, refracted rays that danced across the landscape. Ellis had invited them to join her and a group of Veltrian artisans on a visit to the site, and though Connor still felt slightly out of place, he appreciated the chance to learn more about the planet's culture firsthand. I've been here over a year, James said, crouching down to examine a patch of the glowing moss. And I'm still not used to how alive everything feels. It's like this whole planet is breathing. Breathing in time to some kind of music, Connor added, looking around. There's this rhythm to it all, like everything's connected. Ellis, standing nearby, turned to face them. You're more perceptive than many would expect, Connor. He blinked. Thanks. I mean it as a compliment, she continued, her tone calm but earnest. Many humans who come here focus only on what they can see or touch. They do not sense the harmony that underlies our world. You, however, seem to notice. Maybe I'm just good at listening, Connor said with a small shrug. James chuckled. Sure, now you're the sensitive one. Better than being oblivious, Connor shot back. Ellis's lips curved slightly. Connor was beginning to recognize it as her version of a smile. Both observation and action have their places. Balance is key. As they talked, a group of Veltrian artisans approached. Each carried a set of delicate tools and what looked like raw crystals, their surfaces glowing faintly. The leader of the group, a tall figure with deep green skin and elaborate facial markings, greeted Ellis with a series of intricate hand gestures that Connor had no hope of interpreting. Ellis responded in kind, her movements fluid and precise. What's going on? Connor asked James quietly. They're probably discussing the day's work, James replied, keeping his voice low. Veltrian art isn't just decoration. It's tied to their history and their identity. Each piece tells a story. Connor watched as the artisans began setting up their tools. One of them approached Ellis and handed her a crystal about the size of her palm. She held it carefully, examining its surface with an expression of quiet focus. Is that a finished piece? Connor asked. Not yet, Ellis said, glancing at him. It is a blank canvas, waiting for its story to be shaped. Connor stepped closer, curious. How do you decide what story to tell? Ellis turned the crystal in her hands, the light from its surface reflecting in her golden eyes. The story often reveals itself. It may be inspired by a moment, a memory, or even a fleeting thought. The process is not about imposing meaning, but about discovering it. Kind of like letting it speak to you? Precisely. Ellis handed the crystal to one of the artisans, who began working on it with meticulous precision. It is a collaboration, not a command. Connor nodded, taking it in. That's actually really cool. Ellis looked at him, her gaze steady. It is a reminder that true creation comes from listening as much as from shaping. James leaned against a nearby rock, watching the interaction with a faint grin. Sounds like you've got a new mentor, Connor. Connor shot him a look. I'm just trying to learn something here. And you're doing well, Ellis said, her tone warm but composed. Curiosity is the first step toward understanding. As the artisans continued their work, Connor and James joined them in small tasks. Under Ellis's guidance, they helped sort the raw materials and arrange them by size, color, and intensity of glow. Though the work was unfamiliar, Connor found it oddly satisfying. He wasn't just learning facts about Veltrian culture. He was experiencing it, participating in a tradition that had been passed down for generations. Did you do this kind of work when you were younger? Connor asked Ellis as they sorted crystals together. Yes, she replied, her hands moving deftly. It is common for Veltrian children to spend time with the artisans. Even if one does not pursue it as a calling, the experience teaches patience, precision, and respect for the materials. What about you? Connor asked. Did you ever think about becoming an artisan full-time? Ellis paused for a moment, as if considering the question. I have always been drawn to many paths. While I respect the work of the artisans, my interests extend beyond their craft. I chose to walk a different path, one that allows me to connect with others, both within my people and beyond. That's why you're involved in diplomacy, Connor said, piecing it together. Yes, it is another form of artistry, shaping understanding between different peoples. James, overhearing, nodded thoughtfully. That's one way to put it, and a lot harder than it sounds. Ellis glanced at him. Indeed, it requires more than knowledge. It demands patience, empathy, and the ability to see through another's eyes. Connor held up a crystal he'd just sorted, its surface reflecting shades of blue and violet. I think I'm starting to get what you mean. Even something as simple as sorting these crystals feels, I don't know, connected somehow. It is connected, Ellis said softly. Every action, no matter how small, contributes to the greater whole. That is the essence of our culture. James stretched his arms, letting out a low whistle. You've got your work cut out for you, Connor. Better get used to thinking in terms of the greater whole. Connor smirked. Thanks for the reminder, James. You're such a motivational speaker. As the day wore on, the group took a break to share a meal. The Veltrian artisans brought out containers filled with vibrant fruits and delicate, leaf-wrapped bundles of spiced grains. Connor and James accepted the food gratefully, joining Ellis and the others on a low, woven platform that served as a communal dining area. The conversation turned to lighter topics, with the Veltrians asking questions about Earth's landscapes and traditions. Connor found himself describing forests and mountains, cities and oceans. James chimed in with stories of growing up near the coast, telling how he'd spent weekends sailing and fishing. It sounds like a beautiful world, Ellis said, her tone genuinely curious. I would like to see it someday. You should, Connor said. You'd probably find it fascinating. And we could learn a lot from showing you around. Ellis gave a slight nod. Perhaps one day I will. Plifting as if the voices themselves carried a kind of universal truth. By the time they returned to the city, the stars had begun to emerge, casting a silver glow over the Veltrian landscape. Connor felt a sense of accomplishment, not just from the work they'd done, but from the connections he was starting to build. Ellis, always composed and thoughtful, had opened his eyes to new perspectives. And James, with his laid-back attitude, kept the experience grounded and approachable. As they stood on the terrace once more, gazing out at the crystalline spires, James clapped Connor on the shoulder. Not a bad day, huh? Not bad at all, Connor said with a faint smile. Ellis stepped forward, her golden eyes reflecting the light of the city below. You are beginning to understand more of our ways. That is a good thing. I still have a lot to learn, Connor admitted. Learning is a lifelong journey, Ellis replied. And you are taking the right steps. For the first time since arriving on Veltrian 4, Connor felt a growing sense of belonging. He didn't have all the answers, but he was starting to see the path ahead more clearly. With Ellis and James by his side, he knew he wouldn't have to walk it alone. Connor found himself standing on a narrow platform suspended high above the Veltrian cityscape. The crystalline spires below shimmered in the dim, green-tinted light of the planet's dual moons. He adjusted the collar of his formal tunic, this time a simple, undecorated black, while James, leaning against the railing, glanced over with a sly grin. Look at you, James said, finally figuring out how to dress for the occasion. I learned from my mistakes, Connor replied, though he couldn't help smirking. The last thing he needed tonight was another clothing-related blunder. Across the platform, Veltrian dignitaries gathered in small clusters, their emerald skin glowing faintly under the ambient lights. Ellis stood among them, her tall figure both commanding and elegant. She wore a flowing silver robe with intricate patterns etched into the fabric, and her golden eyes swept over the crowd, observing every detail with quiet precision. James nudged Connor's arm. You've got that look again. What look? Connor asked, trying to sound casual. The look you get when you're thinking about Ellis. Connor rolled his eyes. She's a colleague. A mentor. That's all. James said, crossing his arms. Sure. Before Connor could respond, Ellis approached them. Her steps were deliberate, her presence calming yet somehow intense. When she spoke, her voice carried a warmth that made Connor's nerves settle. Connor, James, Ellis said. I'm glad you could both attend. Tonight's event is significant for our people. Thanks for inviting us, Connor said. I'm looking forward to seeing more of your traditions in action. Ellis regarded him for a moment, then nodded. You've made progress since your arrival. I appreciate the effort you've put into understanding our ways. Still a lot more to learn, Connor replied. But I'm getting there. James grinned. Don't let him sell himself short. He's been doing all right. Ellis's lips curved slightly. Indeed. And your support has not gone unnoticed, James. You have been a steady presence. James shrugged. Someone's got to keep this guy out of trouble. The three of them shared a laugh, the tension of the evening easing. As the event continued, Veltrian artisans presented a series of intricate sculptures, each piece glowing with a soft inner light. They explained, through gestures and melodic phrases, the stories behind the works. Connor found himself captivated, not only by the artistry, but by the way the Veltrians conveyed meaning through a blend of movement and sound. It was a language all its own, one he was only beginning to grasp. I don't know how they do it, Connor murmured to Ellis, leaning slightly closer so she could hear him. It's like they're speaking directly to the heart. Ellis turned her golden eyes to him. Because they are. Our art is not meant to be understood solely with the mind. It is a bridge, a connection that transcends words. Doesn't that make it hard for outsiders? Connor asked. People like me? It can be challenging, Ellis admitted. But that is why you are here, to learn. And from what I've seen, you are willing to embrace that challenge. James, standing a few steps away, caught Connor's glance and gave him a subtle thumbs up. Connor ignored him, focusing instead on Ellis's calm, steady gaze. As the evening progressed, the conversation among the Veltrians turned to the future of their cultural exchanges with humanity. Connor listened closely, eager to understand their perspective. Ellis spoke eloquently about the potential for collaboration, her voice carrying a weight that made everyone pay attention. You have a way with words, Connor said to her afterward, once the crowd began to disperse. I speak from experience, Ellis replied, and from conviction. Connor hesitated, then asked, do you think humanity can really live up to your expectations? Ellis tilted her head slightly, a gesture Connor now recognized as thoughtful consideration. It is not about living up to expectations. It is about mutual growth. We are not seeking perfection. We are seeking understanding. That's a pretty open-minded view, Connor said, a touch of admiration in his voice. Ellis's gaze softened. Understanding is the foundation of trust. Without it, true partnership is impossible. James joined them, looking amused. You two are getting all philosophical again. Me? I'm just here for the snacks. Ellis gave a faint smile. Even the simplest joys have their place. The three of them stayed on the platform as the crowd thinned, the quiet hum of the city below becoming more pronounced. Connor found himself at ease in their company. James's irreverence balanced Ellis's composed wisdom, and the dynamic felt natural, unforced. Eventually, the conversation drifted to lighter topics. James recounted a story from his early days on Veltrian 4, involving a misunderstanding about a fruit that turned out to be a highly valued gift rather than a casual snack. Ellis shared a Veltrian anecdote about a young artisan who accidentally created a masterpiece by trying to fix a mistake. Connor, still new to their world, asked questions and absorbed their answers like a sponge. When it was finally time to leave, Ellis walked with them to the edge of the terrace. The transport pod that would take them back to their quarters awaited, its translucent doors glowing softly. "Thank you for spending time with us tonight," Ellis said. "Your presence matters." "Thanks for having us," Connor replied, feeling genuinely grateful. "I learned a lot." James clapped him on the shoulder. "And you didn't even screw up once. A new record." Connor shook his head, though he was smiling. "I'll take the win." Ellis inclined her head slightly, her golden eyes meeting Connor's. "You are progressing well. Continue to listen, to observe, and to ask questions. In time, you will find your place." Connor nodded. "I'll do my best." James stepped into the transport pod, leaving Connor and Ellis standing alone for a moment. The city's lights shimmered in the distance, and the air felt still and quiet. "Ellis," Connor said hesitantly, "I just wanted to say thanks, not just for tonight but for everything. You've helped me a lot." "You are welcome," Ellis replied. "Your willingness to learn makes it worthwhile." As the transport doors slid open, Connor hesitated. "Do you think we'll keep working together?" Ellis studied him for a moment, then gave a slight nod. "I believe our paths will continue to intersect." With that, she turned and walked away, her figure blending into the soft glow of the Veltrian lights. Connor watched her go, then stepped into the pod beside James. "Nice conversation?" James asked, smirking. "Shut up," Connor said, though he couldn't hide a small grin. The pod hummed to life, carrying them back toward their quarters. Connor leaned back in his seat, letting the events of the evening replay in his mind. For the first time since he'd arrived, he felt like he was starting to truly belong. Not just on Veltrian 4, but in the connections he was building. The training complex on Veltrian 4 was a vast, open space, dotted with glowing markers and moving platforms that tested both physical agility and tactical thinking. Connor stood at the edge of the field, his arms crossed, watching James spar with one of the Veltrian instructors. The instructor, a tall woman with emerald green skin and sharp, golden eyes, moved gracefully, circling James in slow, calculated steps. "You're going to wear yourself out if you keep charging like that," Connor called, smirking. James, drenched in sweat, glanced over his shoulder. "Not helpful, Hayes. I've got this." "You mean she's got you?" Connor replied, leaning against a low, crystalline wall. "Maybe try something different?" The instructor, whose name Connor had learned was Mirel, smiled faintly. "Your friend is right. Strategy, not strength, determines the outcome." James let out a frustrated sigh but adjusted his stance, lowering his center of gravity and moving more deliberately. Mirel responded by increasing her pace, her movements a fluid blur. She dodged James's feints with ease, finally tapping his shoulder with a glowing rod that signified a successful strike. "That's another point for me," Mirel said, stepping back with a hint of amusement. "You're improving, but you still rely too much on brute force." Yeah, James grumbled. "I'll get you next round." As the two continued, Connor turned to Ellis, who had arrived shortly after the session began. She stood silently, watching the match with her usual calm intensity. When Connor joined her, she glanced his way but said nothing. "Is this normal?" Connor asked, motioning to the sparring. "Humans flailing around, Veltrians calmly dismantling them?" Ellis's lips curved slightly. "It is common at first. Your friend has potential, but he has not yet learned to adapt." Connor raised an eyebrow. "And you're saying I could do better?" "I am saying that adaptability is key," Ellis replied, her tone even. "It is not about strength or speed alone. It is about understanding your opponent, anticipating their actions, and adjusting accordingly." "Noted," Connor said, filing away her advice. James let out a loud groan as he lost another round, prompting Connor to stifle a laugh. "I think I'll sit this one out for now," Connor added. "Let him take the bruises." Ellis's gaze lingered on him for a moment. There is more to be learned from observing than from rushing into action unprepared. "You've got a knack for understatement," Connor said, smiling. "But yeah, I get what you mean." They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the match continue. Mirel's movements were a study in precision, her strikes always controlled, her defenses unyielding. James, meanwhile, showed flashes of creativity and determination, though his execution still lacked the finesse necessary to best his opponent. "You admire her technique," Ellis observed. Connor glanced at her, surprised. "What makes you say that?" I can see it in your expression, Ellis replied. You respect skill when you encounter it. Yeah, Connor admitted. She's impressive. I just hope James can keep up. Ellis's gaze returned to the sparring pair. He will improve if he remains open to learning. Persistence is important, but so is humility. Think he'll figure that out soon? Connor asked. That depends on how much he is willing to let go of his preconceptions, Ellis said. Sometimes, the hardest lesson is realizing that what you thought you knew is no longer enough. Connor nodded thoughtfully. I guess that applies to more than just sparring. It does, Ellis agreed, her tone softening. Many lessons extend beyond their original context. By the time James called for a break, he was breathing hard but grinning despite his losses. Next time, I'm taking you down, he said to Mirel, who raised a skeptical brow but nodded in acknowledgement. Connor joined him near the edge of the field, handing him a water container. Nice job, champ. Hey, I'm getting there, James said, gulping down the water. Give me a couple more sessions, and she won't know what hit her. Sure, Connor said, smirking. You're just holding back, right? Exactly, James replied, flashing a lopsided grin. Gotta keep her guessing. Ellis approached them, her golden eyes flicking between the two men. It is good that you remain motivated. Improvement comes through consistent effort. See? Even Ellis thinks I'm motivated, James said, nudging Connor's shoulder. Yeah, Connor said. Just don't hurt yourself trying to impress her. James rolled his eyes but laughed. I'll keep that in mind. Mirel stepped over, her expression less amused but still composed. You show promise, James. With time, you may even be a challenge. High praise, James said, mock bowing. I'll take it. Connor looked between them, then turned to Ellis. So what's next on the agenda? More sparring? Or something a little less painful? Ellis tilted her head, considering. Perhaps a different approach. Physical training is only one aspect. Perhaps we should focus on strategy next time. Understanding the principles behind the movements. James groaned. You mean homework? Knowledge is never wasted, Ellis said simply. Connor chuckled. Looks like we've got a lot of reading ahead. James sighed. Great. Just what I wanted, more studying. Ellis regarded them both, her expression softening. You may find that understanding the why behind the actions makes the how much easier. Connor nodded. That's fair. Okay, we'll give it a shot. As they left the training complex, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the crystalline city. Connor walked alongside James and Ellis, feeling a growing sense of camaraderie. Despite the challenges, despite the differences in culture and expectations, they were starting to form a team. A group that could rely on one another, learn from one another, and ultimately grow together.